All right. If we have a look at this first section here, so where it's got a narrow and deserted street, let's just have a look at some of the imagery that he uses, and we'll link to the material that we were looking at with regards to the two women knitting. Okay, so a narrow and deserted street in deep shadow, high houses, innumerable windows with Venetian blinds, a dead silence, grass sprouting between the stones, imposing carriage archways right and left, immense double doors standing ponderously ajar. I slipped through one of these cracks, went up a swept and ungarnished staircase, as arid as a desert, and opened the first door I came to. So here we get the two women. Here's where we meet these two women. All right? And if we recall, they are representative of fates. Okay? That's the imagery that they represent. Okay, these two women. One fat and the other slim, sat on straw-bottomed chairs knitting black wool. The slim one got up and walked straight at me, still knitting with downcast eyes, and only just as I began to think of getting out of her way, as you would for a somnambulist, stood still and looked up. This is Sleepwalker. All right. Her dress was as plain as an umbrella cover, and she turned around without a word and preceded me into a waiting room. I gave my name and looked about. Deal table in the middle, plain chairs all around the walls. On one end, a large shining map marked with all the colours of a rainbow. There was a vast amount of red, good to see at any time because one knows that some real work is done in there. A deuce of a lot of blue, a little green, smears of orange, and on the east coast a purple patch to show where the jolly pioneers of progress drink the jolly lager beer. However, I wasn't going into any of these. I was going into the yellow, dead in the centre, and the river was there, fascinating, deadly, like a snake. So here's where we get to see, the metaphor or some of the symbolism that Conrad is using with representation for the Congo River. Right, so all of the things that we've discussed with regards to what the snake represents temptation, okay, leading to the path of darkness and sin, okay. There's all of the biblical overtones that are associated with that imagery of the snake, right, and that symbolism. A door opened, a white-haired secretarial head, but wearing a compassionate expression, appeared, and a skinny forefinger beckoned me into the sanctuary. Its light was dim, and a heavy writing desk squatted in the middle. From behind that structure came out an impression of pale plumpness in a frock coat. The great man himself. He was 5'6", I should judge, and had his grip on the handle end of ever so many millions. He shook hands, I fancy, murmured vaguely, was satisfied with my French, bon voyage. Now, if you had any query, I guess, about Marlowe, and then by consequence, Kurtz's understanding of what the company was there to do, this reinforces the corporatization of it. Okay, it reinforces that it's all about the money. Okay, and that links directly with the comment that Marlowe makes following his aunt's remark that he's going to do the good work to save these people. And he says, well, no, actually, we're just going to make some money. So you can start to see the connections between the different passages. In about 45 seconds, I found myself again in the waiting room with the compassionate secretary who, full of desolation and sympathy, made me sign some document. I believe I undertook, amongst other things, not to disclose any trade secrets. Well, I'm not going to. I mean, have a look at the situation that he's facing. All right? She's feeling sorry for him and where he's going. Right? Which remarks towards the idea that she's already seen what comes back. In time-wise, I think it is before because he sees his aunt just before he leaves. Yeah, okay. All right. If you have a look here, we get this next passage which really foreshadows that ominous tone throughout the rest of the text. Okay? I began to feel slightly uneasy. You know, I'm not used to such ceremonies, and there was something ominous in the atmosphere. Right? So he actually is quite explicit about it. It was just as though I had been let into some conspiracy. Again, if you're going to be, form a contention about what is Conrad's purpose in this text, you could quite justifiably form a contention that he's actually been quite scathing of what the colonists are doing, just by the language that he's using in here. Right? Even though this is Marlowe's story, even though it's an unreliable narrator, at the end of the day, Conrad did write it. Okay? I don't know, something not quite right, and I was glad to get out. In the outer room, the two women knitted black wool feverishly. People were arriving, and the younger one was walking back and forth, introducing them. The old one sat in her chair. Her flat cloth slippers were propped up on a foot warmer, and a cat reposed on her lap. She wore a starched white affair on her head, had a wart on one cheek, and silver-rimmed spectacles hung on the tip of her nose. She glanced at me above the glasses. The swift and indifferent placidity of that look troubled me. Two youths with foolish and cheery countenances were being piloted over, and she threw at them the same quick glance of unconcerned wisdom. She seemed to know all about them and about me too. An eerie feeling came over me. She seemed uncanny and fateful. Often, far away there, I thought of these two, guarding the door of darkness. Okay? Knitting black wool is for a warm pall. Right? Pall, I guess, is something that you would wear to a funeral. Okay? And obviously the black is quite powerful imagery, but almost the funeral of all of these young youths. Where are we? These youths, right? These foolish and cheery youths who are going in, and all of that youthfulness, all of that innocence is going to be killed, right, by the Congo. One introducing continuously to the unknown, the other scrutinizing the cheery and foolish faces with the unconcerned old eyes. Ave, old knitter of black wool, moraturi tel salutant. Not many of those she looked at ever saw her again, not half by a long way. Okay? I imagine that it's implying that they're dead, yes. Okay, this line here, not by half, not by a long way, all right, is implying, the danger that they're walking into. Does that make sense? All right. So that's one initial passage that's linked directly to the two women, the knitting, and that whole idea of the office. Okay?